the bar smelled of smoke, spilled beer, and old jukebox songs. Laughter rattled off the tin ceiling as 5 leather-clad biker queens, notorious for chewing men's egos to pieces, threw down their latest challenge. "Win and marry us all," one sneered, her sisters erupting in howls of laughter. The whole bar roared, until the stranger shifted in his chair, the sleeve of his worn jacket sliding back. The ink on his forearm caught the dim light. POW/MIA. Prisoner of war. Missing in action. The laughter died like a bullet through the heart of the room. In an instant, everything changed. And so began a night no one in that dusty roadside bar would ever forget. He wasn't the type of man who belonged in a place like that anymore. His boots were scuffed, his shoulders heavy, his eyes carrying the weight of deserts and jungles far from home. Yet here he was, just another face at the back of the Iron Crown, a bar ruled by the 5 biker queens who had built their legend on daring anyone to prove them wrong. They were sisters by choice, bound not by blood but by scars. Each had her own reputation, Blade with her razor tongue, Diesel with arms as thick as iron pipes, Raven with eyes as sharp as midnight knives, Vixen with the cruelest smile, and Ember, the quietest but deadliest of them all. Together, they were untouchable, their word law in that small outlaw town. Every man who swaggered into their domain knew the drill: if you wanted their respect, you had to win it. And if you failed, you'd crawl out the door humiliated. That night, when the queens tossed their mocking challenge, the bar erupted in cheers. Men elbowed each other, some too drunk to see the trap, others too scared to rise. But the stranger didn't flinch. He simply took a sip of his drink, his eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the walls of that bar. "Hey, old soldier," Blade taunted, striding up with her leather vest glinting under neon lights. "You look like you've already lost enough battles. You think you can win this one?" The crowd laughed. He didn't answer. That's when his sleeve slipped, revealing the tattoo. POW/MIA. Raven's smirk faded first. She'd grown up with a father who never came back from Vietnam. Diesel lowered her beer. Ember's eyes flickered, a storm gathering. For the first time, the queens were silent. The stranger finally spoke, his voice gravelly but steady. "Winning's never about what you take. It's about what you refuse to lose." And with that, the games began. They tested him, arm wrestling against Diesel's monstrous grip, a round of darts with Raven's precision, a shot-for-shot whiskey contest with Vixen, a blade draw with Blade herself. One by one, he faced their trials, not with arrogance, but with patience, resilience, and quiet strength. By the time Ember stood before him with the final challenge, a brutal endurance ride through the desert trail, the bar was no longer mocking. They were watching. Waiting. And he accepted. The desert was cruel that night, the wind cutting like razors and the stars burning like judgment above them. The queens roared ahead on their black Anchrome machines, engines howling like beasts. The stranger followed on a borrowed bike, his silhouette a lone shadow chasing the storm. Every twist of the trail brought memories clawing back, nights of captivity in a foreign jungle, the sound of men screaming in cages, the silence of brothers who never made it home. His tattoo wasn't ink, it was blood carved into skin. He rode not just against the queens, but against ghosts that had never left his side. The queens tried to shake him, tight turns, sudden accelerations, dangerous shortcuts. But every time, he stayed on their tail. His body was battered, his breath ragged, but his spirit refused to break. At one point, Diesel glanced back and muttered to the others through the roar of engines, "He ain't riding to win. He's riding to survive." They reached the cliffside overlook just before dawn. Engines killed, silence fell over the desert. The queens dismounted, sweat and dust streaking their faces. The stranger staggered off his bike, every muscle trembling, but still standing. Ember stepped forward. She had been the quietest all night, but her voice now carried the weight of truth. "You're not like the others. You don't chase pride. You carry something heavier." He looked at her, then at all of them. His voice cracked, but his words cut through the silence. "I ride for the men who never made it back. Every mile I take, they ride with me. That's a promise I don't break." The queen said nothing at first. Then, in an unspoken agreement, each of them removed her cut, the leather vest that marked her as one of the 5. One by one, they draped them over his shoulders. The bar, the challenge, the laughter, it was no longer about winning. It was about honor. When they returned at sunrise, the whole bar waited. The queens didn't mock him. Instead, Blade raised her glass high and declared, "Tonight, we didn't find a winner. We found a brother." The room erupted, not in jeers but in applause. The stranger, once just a shadow in the corner, had become a legend in a single night. And for the first time in years, he smiled, not because he'd won, but because he'd finally come home. This wasn't a story about conquest or ego. It was about scars, survival, and respect. True strength isn't about defeating others, it's about carrying your battles with dignity, and reminding the world that some promises are too sacred to ever be broken.